hear you.
Okay.
Good morning, and welcome to this installment of the Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta's monthly webcast series. This installment is being brought to you a little bit differently in order for our organization to comply with proper social distancing protocols. But we are very excited to have Jim Leonard, a partner from Barnes and Thornburg, speak to us today about a very relevant topic to what's going on today in the world. He'll be talking to us about pandemics, fires, floods, and how secure is your nonprofit from natural disaster. And before Jim talks to you more specifically about these issues related to insurance and risk management, I'd like to give you a little bit of background information on the Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta. My name is Sarisha, and I am an attorney with the organization. And our mission is to provide free legal services to community-based nonprofits that serve low-income and disadvantaged individuals. We match eligible organizations with volunteer attorneys from the leading corporations and law firms in Atlanta. Our clients are 501c3 organizations based in Atlanta or serving the greater Atlanta area who are otherwise unable to afford legal services, and they themselves perform programming for low income or disadvantaged individuals. If you'd like more information about becoming a client of Pro Bono Partnership, please visit our website. You can get more information there. Also on our website, we have a great deal of resources, including other information related to COVID-19 and the current pandemic situation. And in a few days, this webcast with Jim will also be posted on our webcast. So you'll be able to reference the slides and the video again from our website. One final disclaimer, please keep in mind that the information that Jim is sharing with you today is general advice, not specific details for your nonprofit situation. So if you have specific questions, please reach out to your PBPA attorney and we can get more information to you. And today's information is copyrighted by Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta and Barnes and Thornburg. And now, Jim, I'll pass the mic on to you to talk about today's topic. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Sarisha. And welcome to everybody.
Jim, I believe you're still on mute. I can't hear you.
Oh.
Okay, I hear you.
How about now?
I can hear you.
My microphone's showing up. Can you hear?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarisha. And as I said, this is Jim Leonard broadcasting from the edge of the world from our home in Lincolnton, Georgia. You'll have to Google that to find out where that is. Our office, my office is typically in Atlanta and Dallas. And right now those offices are closed. It's funny, we started planning this seminar with the Pro Bono Partnership probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 months ago, before the current events of the coronavirus and its broad impacts across the society and across your businesses and mine. So the timing, I think, of it is pretty interesting and appropriate. I'll also say that I've been married for 36 years. I've raised 4 sons, and the reason I tell you that is to let you know that I'm accustomed to being interrupted. And so if you have questions during the course of the program that occur to you, please feel free to send them in on the chat session, and we'll be monitoring those. And maybe I'll answer those questions during the course of the presentation, and if not, we'll try to get those at the end for a general question session. So just kind of a general background on where the market is, the insurance market, and what's been happening over the last 5 years or so in terms of losses worldwide, and in particular, the type of catastrophic losses that move the insurance industry one way or the other. Starting back in 2016, you'll see that U.S. insured losses were around $23 billion, which was a substantial increase over the prior year. 2017 was the highest hurricane season losses on record of insured losses of 215 billion. And again, what you see over 2018 and 2019 are insured losses and total catastrophic losses kind of ping-ponging around, but generally on an upward trend. And so we're here in 2020 now, and we're going to be able to expect, floods, hurricanes, earthquake, typhoons. And now we have unexpectedly, nobody saw this coming. We had the COVID-19 crisis that we're in right now, which will also, I think, eventually have an impact on the insurance industry. What's happened is that regardless of whether COVID-19 ends up being a broadly covered event, we are in a hard insurance market, meaning you will likely see your premiums go up with your 2020 renewals if you haven't already. I think that's probably a given. We're seeing that across all different types of clients, nonprofit, for-profit, goods, services, across the board. And so that, in a lot of ways, will give you some idea as to how claims will be handled. Because when you have a hard market, what that means is the insurers are having to put out more money to stay in business. And the reason they're doing that, just for some background, is that reinsurance rates are going up. So you ask, what is reinsurance? So reinsurance is insurance that insurance companies buy so that they can remain in business. And so if you look at 2019 and you've got $56 billion of insured losses going on, let's say Travelers has to pay, I'm just picking a number, $10 billion in claims in a given year. They have reinsurance with people in London and Zurich and the Caymans and Bermuda who have very large sacks of money that they will then pay Travelers or Liberty or whoever, the primary insurers, they will pay them for those losses so those primary insurers can stay in business, importantly. But it means that the cost of that reinsurance is going up. And so as the cost of reinsurance goes up, your premiums will also be going up. And so in order for insurance companies to continue to make money, they're going to have to do what they are pretty good at doing right now, which is not paying claims. And so we're seeing that sort of across the board already with COVID-19, but also with other types of losses. Carriers are looking for any possible opportunity that they can to deny coverage. So let's talk about what we do in terms of preparing for a loss. As I said, this webinar is just the timeliness of it is kind of strange. Nobody saw COVID-19 coming. Nobody saw us all working out of our homes a month ago. And yet here we are. And so casualty losses like this, whether it's a fire, a flood, an earthquake, a tornado, a pandemic, these casualty losses are by their nature unexpected. Most people don't plan for a tornado to come take the roof off of their business or for a fire to burn their business to the ground tomorrow. So what I'm asking you to do, and I'm as guilty of this as probably anybody, I'm asking you to prepare your business as if tomorrow your building's going to burn with everything in it. What do you do to best prepare for that? And the first thing, of course, is to be thinking about it in those terms. And maybe to use the downtime that we're all sort of having right now, to maybe think about that and plan for that accordingly. So, knowing your risks, you all have very different types of businesses that you're operating, serving the community, serving, the poorest of the poor and the people in need in a variety of different areas. You probably know your liability risks in doing that. In terms of keeping your business going and being able to recover on your insurance, you probably haven't thought through that necessarily. This would be a good time to do it. So one of the things that I've told a lot of my for-profit as well as my nonprofit is today, go to your facility, take out your phone, and make a video of everything that you own in that building. Take a video of the building if you're lucky enough to own your building. And nonprofits who were fortunate enough to be able to own their facility. Take a video of that facility. Take a video of your property and send that video to your email and make sure that video is stored somewhere on the cloud. That is, and then of course on the video, state the date and time and who's making the video. That will be valuable evidence, again, if your building burns down, which it might. We all know now what happens to our businesses day to day. There's no way to predict it. But the way to get ahead of that is to be able to produce a video to the insurance company and say, yes, I had 3 computers. Here they are on this video. Yes, we did actually have some artwork that was donated to us and it was somewhat valuable. And here's a video of it. It's much easier to be able to do that with visual evidence. And as a lawyer and a trial lawyer, it's much better to have that, picture worth 1,000 words, to be able to present that information to the insurance company and say, this is what you need to pay because this is what our loss is. Knowing your values as well. Know what the values are at risk. And that's obviously important when you're submitting a claim, but also at your renewals, when you're renewing your policy during the course of this year. A lot of people have end of March renewals. As you're getting up to that point, make sure that you know what the values are that are at risk in your organization and that you're actually insuring those in your renewal coverage. And then have a plan, as I said. Maybe this is a good time to do it if things, I know I'm hearing from a lot of people that, things are slow in their businesses right now. If you have the time, actually stop and think about, okay, if my building were to burn down tomorrow, my entire business were to be shut down, as it maybe is right now, identify who is going to be responsible. Now, if this is a one-person show and it's just you, then you probably know who's going to be responsible. But if you have employees that you can delegate different duties to in the event of a catastrophe, have certain people responsible for different items. So we're going to look at those in a moment. Also, have a pre-approved contractor in mind. So whether it's a Service Master or ServPro, or if it is, and this is often the case in insurance policies, they will list the name of suggested providers who are authorized service providers under your insurance. Reach out and have that contact information available, because I've heard from people who are literally standing there watching their building burning down and say, what do I do? Who do I call? And the first thing is, you've got to call a ServPro type organization to actually start the cleanup. Have those ready to go. Changes to supply chain and changes to distribution channel. Obviously, that's more for for-profit entities who are producing products. But you also have to think about, if I'm feeding the hungry, and what if my sources at the food bank or wherever dried up? Where would I go to get the resources I need if my normal supply chain is interrupted? And start thinking about those alternative distribution channels. Data management. I cannot tell you how many clients I have had. I have one, frankly, right now, who had a fire in their for-profit business. And they said, well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is I had all of my tax information, I had all of my billing records and all of my inventory records on my computer. Well, that's great. The bad news is the computer was in the fire. I cannot tell you how many times I've had that happen over the course of 22 years of serving as a policyholder. Make sure that your data management is better than the computer that's left in the office, that you either have a backup on the cloud or you're backing up that information somewhere else off premises. That is so important because we're dealing with that right now in a situation where we may not be able to recreate all of the documents. So make sure your data management is secure and you have an alternate. Communication strategy. So who is going to be responsible for and what will be the messaging going out to your customers, to your vendors, to your employees? Who is in charge of that? Make sure you have a single person in charge because mixed messaging can be very confusing for people, and you want to kind of control what it is that you're saying so that you have clear, honest communications with everybody involved with your entity. And then have an insurance strategy, and that might be just reaching out to your broker and finding out from your broker whether what contacts do they have in the service contractor industry. What is the plan in the event of a major loss? What role will your insurance broker or your insurance coverage lawyer play in that? So it's important to have those strategies thought out, discussed, and planned for the day before your loss. So this is again, it's kind of the core team in any major fire, flood, pestilence, virus type of major loss. This is your core team. Legal, of course, many of you will be going through the Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta and the great people there to help with your legal team. Finance, and that is who is going to keep the money coming in, who's going to be managing the money the day of and the day after the crisis. So having those people in place with a plan in place will make this so much smoother for you, I promise. And then facilities and operations. Who is the manager on the ground? And again, if this is a one-person shop, then you're going to be very busy. But you might be able to delegate some of this to your broker or to your legal team. But just trying to manage the operations on the ground is critical. And then, of course, insurance and risk management, protecting against losses as they may come up. That's critical as well. So again, let's assume you've made the claim submission to your commercial property insurance company. You want to find out first who is your insurer assigned to handle the loss. So is it just a claims representative? Is it third-party adjuster? Do they have forensic accountants? Do they have engineers? Who have they hired and assigned to investigate your loss? Because you want to make sure you have those same areas covered. And again, I think this is an area where you can seek assistance from the Pro Bono Partnership and lawyers like myself and others who also have contacts in the professional areas that you might need to adjust claims who are also willing to work pro bono in many instances. You have public adjusters as well who would operate off of a percentage of the recovery as well. So those are potentially available, but you want to have the same areas of expertise matching what the insurance company is. And then I have a rhetorical question here. What if there are disagreements? Folks, there are always disagreements. The question is, what do you do and how are decisions made when those disagreements happen? And it's going to particularly happen now, unfortunately, because of the hard market that I was discussing. Insurance companies have to find a way to continue to be profitable and to make money for their shareholders. So one of the ways to do that is to nickel and dime even more than normal how much is being paid for these types of major problems. And then is the decision made by the insured, and you have to obtain consent from the insurer. Do you need written consent? Will oral consent be sufficient? All of those, of that decision making process, be aware of it because that is in your policy as to who makes the decisions with respect to how the organization reacts to these types of major. The first one here on this slide, how you document your claim. This is again, extremely important. Um, don't let the insurer calculate your loss. That's like asking the fox to tell you how many chickens you have. That number seems to always shrink based on how many chickens you thought you had. You're in charge of obtaining the information for your loss. Don't let the insurance company guide that process. You have to know your coverage, work with your broker, work with your counsel to know what your coverage is, and then provide the information supporting that. This next one, capture costs from the beginning. I cannot tell you again from my experience how many times uh, the claims process has been made so much more difficult. You don't capture information from the time that the building is burning to the very end of it. And I will assure you, it is hectic and it is crazy at the very beginning. But you have to have a procedure in place. And if you have that plan, that procedure in place that says, okay, any sort of emergency cost will be charged only on this credit card or only out of this account. And if you just follow that assiduously and have all of those invoices captured in one place, one computer file or one hard copy, it will make things so much easier down the road. Do it from the beginning. And then submit your claim, capture your information consistent with what your coverage is. So if you have replacement cost value versus actual cash value, capture your costs in accordance with that. If you have extra expense coverage, then be sure to capture all of those extra expenses that are actually covered under the policy. So that you're capturing, you're tracking your claim in accordance with what the coverage is. And then consultants. Again, it's so important to get the right consultants on board to match the ones that your insurance company has hired and get the ones that are appropriate for your loss. And so, again, your public adjuster, your counsel, pro bono partnership can help with that in the event that you have losses that require multiple different types of experts. Coverage counsel. So that's what I've done for the last 22 years. And then for the 10 years before that, I was the vice president of claims and general counsel of a big insurance company. So I will tell you, as coverage counsel, I will be happy to retire and not do this anymore if insurance companies suddenly started paying claims, but they're not. And so, in this hard market, you may very well need coverage counsel that you could obtain from pro bono partnership or otherwise. So it's important to, if you have pushback from the carrier, they're not paying your claim promptly, they're not making advance payments as they should, coverage counsel can be very effective in making that happen. And then proofs of loss. Sometimes insureds forget about these. So a proof of loss is very frequently required under your policy terms. I would be surprised if you didn't have that provision in your policy. A proof of loss is a form that is a sworn to form that's, and it can change during the course of the claim as the claim progresses. But the proof of loss is something that is required. The carriers will sometimes not remind you that it's required. So sometimes you have to get out in front of that and say, here's my proof of loss. Have a notary swear your numbers are accurate to the best of your knowledge and get that in, because that starts triggering deadlines after the submission of proof of loss. Most carriers, most of these policies contain provisions for examinations under oath, EUOs, where they can come in and take a deposition of a representative of the insured. That's also very common, and you have to be prepared for those. And I would not, frankly, give an EUO without having coverage counsel to support you. Appraisal, as again I mentioned earlier, there will be disputes. It's just the way this market is right now. And so they will dispute what the value of a particular property is, or your personalty, or a vehicle, whatever it is. There will be a dispute about the value of it. Most policies have an appraisal clause in them, which requires, if there is a dispute over the value, not whether there is coverage one way or the other, that's not subject to appraisal in Georgia, because we have a very good statute about prohibiting arbitration of coverage disputes. But there is an appraisal clause that can be waived by the insurance companies. It is often subject to negotiation. So the standard appraisal provision is, if there's a dispute about the value of a property, then the insured appoints an appraiser, the insurer appoints an appraisal, and then they both submit names of umpires, and then 2 out of 3 would make the decision on the value of the property. Again, if you and the insurer can agree on a single person, that keeps the cost down. And again, sometimes it can be waived, or they can be stopped from raising it if they deny coverage outright. So something to keep in mind in terms of appraisal. On causation, so many times in flood cases, you'll see that coverage is prohibited for floods. If you're in a 100-year floodplain, which is most of us, flood is going to be excluded from your policy, and that's both natural and artificial bodies of water. Carriers really want to avoid coverage for floods. So if you are concerned about that, you really need to work with your broker hard and maybe look at the National Flood Insurance Company for specific flood. But that includes hurricanes, heavy rain, overflow of dams, canals, and so forth. So be aware of that. You think you may be covered for flood, but actually it's more likely that you're not. In addition, carriers have what's called anti-concurrent causation clauses, which is not easy to say. Anti-concurrent causation clauses, which prohibit payments of losses if the excluded cause of loss is in any way contributory to your loss. And this is going to come into play if it's broader than flood in your policy with regard to the current COVID-19 issue. So if you have, for example, flood excluded, and you have one of these ACC clauses, it could mean that regardless of whether there is another cause to your loss, if the excluded cause happened, then you will not have coverage. There are a few states that do not enforce these. California is one of them. Georgia will likely enforce these, so that's certainly an issue that we have to be mindful of. Business interruption. So I noticed my partner Steve Oppler is on here, and he had asked earlier, can nonprofits obtain business interruption coverage? The answer is yes. If you have that type of coverage, business interruption and extra expense coverage can help provide money for you to continue your business operations in another location. And so it can also help you cover payroll. It can help you maintain the operations of your business if there's been a direct physical loss of your property. So we're going to look at that a little bit more as we talk some about COVID-19 here. With regard to direct business interruption, so the area of law that we're going to be litigating over COVID-19 is this first one under direct business interruption. And it's all about the word of. This is what we do as coverage lawyers. We live and die by words. And your policies are written in English, believe it or not, and words matter, especially in this area. And so the key area here of dispute will be, what does it mean when the policy says direct physical loss of or damage to covered property by a covered cause of loss? That is like, that wording is likely, 99% likely in your policy. Direct physical loss of or damage to. Now, the carriers interpret that to mean there has to be a physical impact on your location, on your operations, in order for there to even be the possibility of any. That's not what it says, however. From our view, it says direct physical loss of, so it's the direct physical loss of your property, your business. It's not a direct physical loss to your property, meaning your property is physically damaged in some way. It means you've had the physical loss of it, which means for a restaurant, their main dining room is now closed because of, and then we have to have a covered cause of loss. We'll talk about that. So the issue is, has your business been shut down? And some of you are completely out of business at this point. I've heard from some of the webinar responses. Some of you have had a complete physical loss of your business. Now, the carriers have already started circling the wagons and are issuing statements that direct physical loss of or damage means a physical impact on your business, and that the COVID-19 virus does not constitute a physical loss of your business. That is not what your policy says, and that's what's going to be litigated. There have already been a couple of cases filed, a couple by tribes in Oklahoma and another lawsuit by a restaurant in New Orleans. These will be litigated. This is the heart of the issue right here. And then what constitutes a covered cause of loss? This is where policies vary. And again, it's important to take out your policy and read it and talk about what your coverage is with your broker. Because if you have a policy that provides for broad cause of loss, meaning we cover any cause of loss except those that are excluded or limited, that is a pretty common form. Some are called specified peril policies, which means that we will cover you for, and they list everything: fire, lightning, windstorm, tornado, civil commotion. See if your policy says civil commotion. Because it's my view that if you look outside your window, if you're in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, there is civil commotion outside that has caused the direct physical loss of my business. Let that sink in for a moment. If we can prove those terms with the facts that are ongoing right now in this country, there is broad coverage for these losses, because you will see, if you look in your policy, civil commotion is one of the areas that is specifically covered. What does that mean? It's not defined in your policy. It means what we as policyholder lawyers and prove it to me and what was intended by it. And so certainly that is one area where we think there is broad potential to obtain coverage for clients across the country. Ingress, egress, and civil authority. These are two different types of coverage for your businesses. The ingress, egress, we'll talk about in a minute. Civil authority is what we're seeing now. And so a government order that is responding, though, to direct physical loss of or damage to property. Normally, this is more spelled out, so people think, oh, there's civil authority that's been in place. Mayor Bottoms has now issued a civil authority order to, basically shelter in place. Does that constitute a government order that responds to direct physical loss of or damage to property? That's the question that would be litigated. So it's not as clear coverage under civil authority as maybe it is under civil commotion, if that, again, makes sense. And then service interruption, we don't know what's going to happen with utilities, but with fires, floods, and so forth, you may very well have interrupted utility service, and that can cause a business interruption, which then triggers that business interruption and extra expense coverage as well. Ingress, egress. So this is, again, something that we're seeing today. Is the ability to access your facility prevented? And if it is, then you can get coverage for that under your policy. That's likely in each one of your policies. The language, however, differs from policy to policy, from insurer to insurer. None of these are the same across the board. Some require that the ability to get to your building is prevented. And if it's prevented versus impaired or hindered, meaning you could conceivably access it, but it's dramatically hindered, such as it is right now, shelter-in-place orders, does that constitute a trigger of your ingress egress coverage? Also, is there a physical damage requirement? Sometimes there is a very strict physical damage requirement in order to trigger the ingress egress coverage. If it's not there, then I would argue that civil authority that's been issued has in fact caused an ingress egress coverage trigger under your policy, so that you are in fact impaired and hindered and prevented from getting to your facility, using your facility, because people aren't allowed to come to it. Again, we have to look at peril or cause of loss. Is it specified peril, or is it general causes of loss? The civil authority is not required. I think it certainly helps in this situation, if you're in and around Atlanta, that you now have civil authority acting. Most of the coverage has time limitations, so there's a 24 or 48 hour waiting period, and then you have coverage for certain specified periods of time that's covered. Be aware of those. The period of coverage can vary dramatically depending on what type of coverage. But again, that goes back to knowing what your risks are, understanding what your risks are. What if I am shut down for a week versus 3 months? What is the difference in the impact to my business in those different situations? So COVID-19, again, this was not a slide 3 months ago. As we discussed, COVID-19 triggers a variety of different issues, and we're going to see a dramatic fight with the entire insurance industry over this, because this could be catastrophic. And we don't know yet whether the federal government is going to step in as a type of backstop for insurance companies, such that they would be paying these claims and then going back to the federal government for reimbursement, which is similar to the TRIA, which is the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, where insurers may have to pay out on select acts of terrorism, but then they have a backstop with the federal government. There has been discussion about this, and we'll be watching to see how that is implemented and if it's implemented. But that could be also a way of gaining coverage. Let me give you 3 words that everybody should be aware of with regard to coverage for COVID-19, as well as any other dramatic catastrophic business. Those 3 words are notice, notice, notice. You must give prompt notice of laws to your insurance company. In Georgia, the law is unfortunately terrible for policyholders in this regard. If you do not give timely notice of claims, the insurance companies will have very strong arguments to later on say you don't have any coverage. So if you think you've had a loss, have somebody look at it, examine it, but give timely notice of the claim. And the carriers may just send you back by return mail their form denial letter, but you have at least triggered the coverage by giving notice. If you don't give notice, you will not have it. So I want to emphasize that. Take that away from this webinar. Notice, notice, notice. That is true in any type of loss, fire, flood, any sort of claim made against you. Make sure you give timely notice. There are often limited by the number of days from the event. Sometimes it's just immediately, as is described in many policies. Timely notice as soon as possible. Get the notice in. So what constitutes direct physical loss of, the word of, or damage to covered property? Here, we think that with the combination of coverage for civil commotion, that an argument can be made that this coverage is triggered. And then that's the first thing, is triggering the coverage. As a policyholder lawyer, that's what we look to do. We have to trigger the coverage first. And then we have to address the exclusions. So many policies, starting back in 2006, started having what's called an ISO form, virus and bacteria form exclusion put on. You may or may not have this exclusion in your policy. This, of course, will be set forth by the carriers as a basis for denying all COVID-19. No question. That will be one that we will have to fight. The argument will be that the civil commotion is not directly arising from the virus. It is arising from the calamitous situation with regard to not being able to obtain products and services, and the fear of illness versus actually having a virus or bacteria. So there will be we're going to have arguments. There will be ways to get around some of these exclusions, but that will be one that we've already seen advanced by carriers. Pollution exclusions. If your facility has to be cleaned up because maybe one of your employees had exposure, and I've got a couple of clients that are dealing with this right now, where they've had to incur the extra expense of cleaning their facility in a special way versus what is normally done. Carriers are citing the pollution exclusion, which is a pretty broadly written exclusion, but it doesn't say virus in it. It says liquid, solid, gaseous, irritant, or contaminant. That means is what it means. We're going to probably litigate over that for the clients who have very large losses in that regard, factories. So pollution exclusions will be advanced. As I said, I think the recent civil authority order from the mayor will help in terms of policyholders obtaining coverage. I think there are good arguments to make that in the current setting, all things considered, what's happened here is, in fact, a covered loss. And it's a very broad, catastrophic covered loss for the insurance industry, which means they're doing exactly what we expected they would be doing, which is, of course, to circle the wagons. And so there will be fights over this, unfortunately. We're going to try to get the insurance commissioner involved and the governor. We see a couple of other states like New Jersey who are enacting legislation to provide that these types of losses are indeed covered. So we're going to think about what we can do here in Georgia to try to protect policyholders' interests, legislative or regulatory. So with that, I would just sort of wrap up by saying that planning is key. Tell yourself that tomorrow the building's going to burn down, that the roof is going to be torn off by a tornado. What would I do today to make that easier? And I guarantee you that when it does happen, and unfortunately it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we're looking at it right now, circumstances. What happens if your business is hit with one of these catastrophic events? Have the plan in place. Have the people identified who will be handling each of these areas. Have that plan circulated to the people so they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And then do not accept no for an answer from your insurance company. Once you send notice, I will say again, I see we're almost out of time, but I will say again, notice, notice, notice. Get the notice of loss and claim to your carrier, and don't take no from them, because that is going to be the answer. That will be the first answer you get. None of these carriers is going to accept coverage outright. So to the extent you need assistance, I would say, you've got a great partner in the pro bono partnership. You've got public adjusters and others that are ready, willing, and able to fight this and to help you. So with that, it is 11:45. Let's see. We can maybe look at some questions. will this recording be emailed out? I guess I'll ask Sarisha about that. I believe it'll be available on the Pro Bono Partnership website.
That's right. It will be available on the website, and we will be sending it out to anyone who pre-registered.
And then my partner Stephen asked if the slides would be available as well, and I imagine they would be.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if there aren't any further questions now, thank you so much, Jim, for this presentation. It was very helpful.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure. Everybody be safe out there. And thank you for the opportunity to come into your homes and your businesses to speak with you today. Appreciate it.
Jim, I think okay. I thought we might have some questions, but with some just further thank yous. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Good day.